Most landlocked states have a single designated freshwater fish, but many states that border an ocean have both freshwater and saltwater state species. And then there are others that perhaps have just a single anadromous species that fills the niche of both categories. The state freshwater fish of Alabama is the largemouth bass, which any angler from the south would recognize as an iconic game fish. The saltwater fish is the Atlantic tarpon, also known as the fighting tarpon. Alaska has a single state species, which is the anadromous Chinook salmon. This fish lives most of its life out at sea, but then comes into freshwater rivers to spawn, undergoing that amazing transformation into that bright red, hook-jawed fish that many of us know and love. I think that this fish is just a wonderful icon to represent Alaska's incredible fishing. The Apache trout is an important native symbol to the state of Arizona, as it is basically found in no other state with the exception of a tiny bit of New Mexico. Arkansas is the only state to be represented by the alligator gar, which is an iconic fish to many anglers in the state and the surrounding areas. The freshwater fish of California is the golden trout, which is a beautiful little trout with a limited native range found in the mountains of California. The saltwater fish is the Garibaldi, a bright orange fish found along California's Pacific coast. Colorado has the greenback cutthroat trout, which is a subspecies of cutthroat found almost exclusively in the state of Colorado. Connecticut has a single state fish, the American shad, which is an anadromous species that has historically been an important food source for the native peoples in that area. Delaware just has a state saltwater fish, the weakfish, which, similar to Connecticut's American shad, had a historical importance. It gets its name from the weak mouth which easily tears when it's caught by anglers. The state freshwater fish of Florida is the Florida bass, which is a close cousin to the largemouth bass, with a native range only found in Florida. The saltwater fish is the Atlantic sailfish, which is a popular and important sport fish for Florida anglers. Georgia actually has three state fish, the largemouth bass, the southern Appalachian brook trout, which is the coldwater state fish, and the saltwater species, which is the red drum. Hawaii only has a state saltwater fish, which is the reef or wedge-tailed triggerfish, also known as the Humu Humu Nuku Nuku Apua'a. This fish is a common sight to see while snorkeling on Hawaii's reefs. Idaho's state fish is the cutthroat trout, referring to the three native subspecies of cutthroat found in the state. The state fish of Illinois is the bluegill, making Illinois one of only two states in the country to have a panfish as the state fish. Indiana unfortunately does not have a state fish, but maybe someday that'll change. Iowa technically doesn't have a state fish either, however the Iowa darter is in the process of potentially becoming Iowa's fish here in the near future. The state fish of Kansas is the channel catfish, which is a popular sport fish and common table fare in the region. Kentucky's state fish is the spotted bass, which is another member of the black bass family and a close relative to the common largemouth bass. Louisiana has the white crappie as their freshwater species and the spotted sea trout as the state saltwater species, both of which are a popular sport fish in the state. Maine has the Atlantic salmon, but more specifically the landlocked Atlantic salmon, referring to populations that are only found in freshwater and no longer migrate to and from the ocean. Maine is the only state on the East Coast with a state species of salmon. The striped bass represents many states on the East Coast, Maryland being one of them. Striped bass is an anadromous species, filling the niche of both freshwater and saltwater for Maryland. Atlantic cod is Massachusetts' state fish, and an important fish for the region both historically and in modern times, as reflected in the naming of Massachusetts' famous Cape Cod. The brook trout is a very beloved fish to many states in the eastern half of the US, Michigan being one of many to have this species as the state fish. Walleye is a popular species to the state of Minnesota and often the fish that people think of when fishing in Minnesota's waters. Mississippi is yet another state to boast the largemouth bass as the state species. Missouri's official freshwater fish is the channel catfish, but Missouri also has a second species, being a state that also has an official aquatic animal, which in this case is the paddlefish. Montana is also represented by a species of cutthroat, more specifically the West Slope cutthroat, which is found in much of western Montana. Like both Kansas and Missouri, Nebraska is represented by the channel catfish. Lahontan cutthroat trout is a special species for Nevada because of its amazing history and its massive size. This cutthroat was at one point thought to be extinct, but made an incredible comeback and is now famously found in Nevada's Pyramid Lake as well as the surrounding areas. The Lahontan cutthroat trout is the largest of all the subspecies of cutthroat trout. Brook trout and striped bass are both very cherished fish to the northeast, and New Hampshire is represented by both of these species. New Jersey has the exact same state fish as New Hampshire. However, the state of New Jersey just recently chose the striped bass in 2017. But on the other hand, they did choose the brook trout 3 years prior to New Hampshire, so I guess both states are guilty of copying one another. The Rio Grande cutthroat trout is a species of cutthroat found mostly in New Mexico, and a beautiful species to represent that area. So going back to New Hampshire and New Jersey, New York also has the same pair, brook trout and striped bass. But New York was actually the first of the 3 to choose the brook trout, and the second to choose striped bass behind New Hampshire. Despite all 3 states having the word new in their name, it sure seems they're struggling to find new ideas for state fish species. North Carolina has the southern Appalachian brook trout as the official freshwater species, and the red drum as the official saltwater species. North Dakota is the one and only state to choose northern pike, which I think is a very good fit for the state. Ohio doesn't actually have a state fish, however walleye is currently being considered and will likely become Ohio's state fish within the next few years. Oklahoma is another state with a state species unique to them being represented by the white bass. Like Alaska, Oregon's state fish is the beloved Chinook salmon, which migrates into Oregon's rivers to spawn, along with the rest of the Pacific Northwest. Pennsylvania is famous for their love of brook trout, and they join much of the East in selecting that species. Rhode Island chose the striped bass, which is perhaps the main sport fish in that state. The same could be said for many of the coastal areas in South Carolina, as they chose the striped bass as well. Back to the Dakotas, we have walleye being the state fish of South Dakota and an important fish to that region. Surprisingly, Tennessee is the only state with smallmouth bass as their state fish. Tennessee is also unique in that they have an official freshwater commercial fish, which is the channel catfish. Texas continues the black bass trend of the South with Guadalupe bass as the freshwater fish and red drum as the saltwater fish. The Bonneville cutthroat trout is found in the Bonneville Basin, which encompasses much of the state of Utah and is both historically and modernly important for the state. Vermont actually has 2 freshwater species, the brook trout being the coldwater fish and the walleye being the warmwater fish. And then there's Virginia, which continues the East Coast trend even further of having the 2 state fish as brook trout and striped bass. But Virginia wasn't the first to select either species, so I think you could confidently say in this case that it wasn't an original idea to Virginia. Nonetheless, the 2 species represent the state very well. Washington is the only state to choose the steelhead, which honestly I think was an excellent choice for the state. West Virginia is the last state on the list with brook trout as the state fish, but it is definitely a state that deserves to be represented by the species. The muskellunge is a wonderful fish to represent the state of Wisconsin, and is a very iconic fish to that state. Lastly, we have Wyoming, another western state that chose cutthroat trout, which in Wyoming's case includes 4 native subspecies. I compiled all this information into a map, and I thought that it was just so cool to see which species of fish are regionally significant to certain parts of the country, with cutthroat obviously dominating the west, brook trout and striped bass in the northeast, and largemouth and other black basses in the south. Hey everybody, it's Nathan. Thank you so much for watching this video. It really helps me out when you watch the video all the way through like that. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, as that's a free way you can help me out and help support my channel. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you on the next one.